Hello, I'm Eva, and I would like to welcome you to another episode of The Charm of It, a podcast for knitters who share my fascination with the nitty-gritty details of our craft. Today I'll be talking about finished objects, works in progress, and I'll be answering a viewer question as the topic, and it's from She-Bear. Hi! And it's about whether my stashing philosophy has changed and what my stash looks like today and that kind of thing. It has been a long time since I've talked about stash. In fact, I don't remember when the last time was, maybe 2 years ago. But yeah, so that'll be interesting to revisit. I thought that would be a nice, light kind of discussion since I went very technical last week. So, I've got quite a few finished objects because I'm still in the midst of my holiday knitting. My family's holiday is Christmas, but I don't want to be exclusive to anyone, so try to remember to say holiday. First up, I finished the mittens for my boyfriend's mom. I love these so much. I'm just thrilled with how they came out. I think that they look like something you'd buy at a very fancy department store. And yeah, so here they are when they're not being worn. I hadn't actually seen how they were being worn with the pom-poms, but they look really nice to me. And little pom-poms. Pom-poms are always a good idea. And close up. So I have talked about these as a work in progress before, but I'll just go over all the details. They are knit out of Knit Pick Swish Worsted in Squirrel and Black, and those were colors that my boyfriend chose. And I kind of mocked him for choosing a bunch of neutrals, because he also chose the gray yarn for his stepfather's hat. But I have to admit it looks so nice and classy, so I have to eat a little bit of crow there. And I used the herringbone mitten pattern, which is a free pattern on Ravelry. I think it's a really great colorwork mitten because there's never more than 4 stitches in the same color, and that's only on the side seams. In this section, you're never going more than 2 stitches. So it's really simple to knit, and it makes a really nice, consistent fabric. Here's the inside. See? Really nice. Let's see, what else? I modified them, obviously. I included the kind of fit modifications that I did on the project page, and I know I talked about that last time, so I won't go into that again. But I also modified them to be convertible, and this I actually changed up. I have a tutorial on how to make any mitten convertible. If you're interested, you can find it on my YouTube channel, where presumably you are watching this. So I did it the same way, put in the yarn for the afterthought, and did all that. However, for this cuff, instead of using worsted weight yarn, I used fingering weight yarn. This is also Knit Pick Stroll in Black. I just had it left over from another gift project. And I did that so that there would be less smooshiness right here, so that if she wants to drive or something while wearing these mittens, there won't be a lot of fabric right there. And I really like how that turned out. That's probably what I'm going to do for future mittens, assuming I have fingering weight yarn that coordinates. And the pom-poms are included in the pattern, as is the little crochet cord that you add to go with the pom-pom. Although I did have to sew my pom-pom down separately because I didn't really want it sagging. And I just used the smallest of the Clover pom-pom makers. Let's see how many times I can say that in 2 minutes. That I have, which is the pink size, because, you know, we didn't want to get carried away. It is going to be on someone's wrist. And, yeah, I'm just really, really pleased with how they turned out. Anything else to talk about? I don't think so. Just excited to be gifting them. Making them convertible certainly adds more time, so just if you've never done that before, mentally prepare yourself is all I would say. But that's a good pattern. Okay, next up is a decidedly non-neutral project. This is for my niece, and she requested a rainbow headband. Sorry, I know the focus goes off when I move. So, once I decided I was going to go ahead and knit a gift for everyone, I asked my niece what she wanted, and I've already bought her main gift, so I told her it had to be something small and simple. And that's when she told me she wanted a rainbow headband, and I was putting together Knit Pick's order for gift knitting yarn, and they had this yarn on their website. Special reserve, I think, means that it's not always there, but it's Japanese wool rainbow. It's a bulky, I think. Yeah, which I've never knit before. It's 35 yards and 50 grams. And I would not have had needles that size, but luckily one of my friends has just taken up knitting, and she started with bulky yarn, and she also bought a giant collection of DPN, so she lent me some needles for this project. And let me show you what it looks like on. I made it so that it's a little squishy on my head because my niece's head is a little smaller. She's 12 now, but I had my sister measure her head, and she is still smaller than adult size. But it's Headband. I made it a little smaller at the back for comfort. I don't really know if my niece is going to wear it this style or to actually pull her hair back. And all I did was I cast on here to the width that she wanted, which was around 2 inches, and I slipped the first stitch, and then I just knit in 1x1 ribbing. And I did have to try a couple different stitch counts to get one that was the width she wanted, but it also worked out to really make those rainbow stripes work really nicely. And then once I gotten most of the length that I needed, I started decreasing. And then right before the end, I increased a little just so that it looked more symmetrical, and then I bound off and grafted it together. So there is a little seam in there, but I don't notice it on the back of my head, so hopefully my niece will not either. And it really didn't take much yarn at all. This is the yarn. Isn't this massive? I mean, it's essentially roving. And it's so cheerful. But it didn't even take half the skein. I think maybe it took half. I'll have to, you can check the project page if you're that curious. But I'm going to knit her a collar for her dog, a matching collar, since I've got the leftover yarn. She likes to dress her dog up, so obviously this won't be like the kind of collar that you leave on your dog for walking them, but I figured since she brings them in parades and that kind of thing, so it might be fun to have matching doggy collar. And that was a really quick project. I felt like I was in a cartoon or an anime character or something. The needles were so gigantic, the yarn was so big, and it just appeared in front of me. It was really funny. I think it took maybe 40 minutes. But it was fun. It's not something, I can't imagine wanting to knit with bulky yarn and giant needles for a big project, because it seems like it would get heavy very quickly, but for a little project, it felt different, but in a satisfying way. My final finished objects are a whole lot of gnomes. I've got 6 on my Christmas list this year. I had already knit 1, and this week I knit 4. So, first up, I knit gnomes for the partners of 2 of my really good friends here, who I'm also knitting presents for. So, one said that her partner's favorite color is red, so I wanted to knit a little red gnome for him. There we go. And I didn't have any red variegated yarn, so I striped the body, and I just did manual striping, and then I think I tried to put the beard, yeah, so that it hides the join. But there's that little guy, and I used Alice Starmore Hebridean 2-ply and Sea Anemone for the red, and the gray, the dark gray, is Knit Picks Palette and Marble, and the very pale gray for the beard, and the hands is Knit Picks Palette and Finley. And the body is Never Not Gnoming by Sarah of Imagine Landscapes. The beard is from her second gnome pattern, which is the cabled gnome. Here we gnome again. And that's because I knit a cabled gnome for Kristen earlier this year, and since this is for her partner, I thought it would be nice if the beards matched. Then I knit this one for Kyle, who is Christy's partner. And I did knit Christy a gnome for her birthday too. She's the one that got like the foresty gnome, but she told me that Kyle likes blues and grays and neutrals. So I used this, which is a mystery yarn that someone sent me, and it's a really pretty marled color. It's like taupe and cream and blue. And then the body is Nature Spun Sport, but it's a very fine sport weight, although it did turn out a little larger. I used the same size needles for all of them. In Blue Fog, which is my favorite shade of blue. And I have a whole cone of this because I plan to knit myself a sweater, but unfortunately Nature Spun is too itchy for me to knit sweaters with, so that just sits in my stash. And then the white is Knit Picks Palette in cream, and I knit the like, it's the same Never Not Gnoming pattern, and I also just knit the beard and the nose from that pattern for this one. I think this is the horizontal beard. I don't know. There's 2 beard options. I was kind of changing it up to keep things interesting. And then since I had the red yarn out, I went ahead and knit a Santa gnome for my friend Debbie, who loves Christmas and has a lot of holiday decor and lots of Santas. So I knit a Santa gnome for my mom last year, and I knew that I wanted to knit one for Debbie as well. So this is the same Alice Starmore Hebridean 2-ply in Sea Anemone. The cream is Knit Picks palette, and the beige is also Knit Picks palette in, maybe Hair Heather? I think it's that. And then I just used a little bit of the Stroll Fingering in black for the Santa belt. I think maybe I should have made the Santa belt a row longer, because I think I've been stuffing them chubbier lately. Because here's the one that I knit last week. Yeah, this week's are all much chubbier, aren't they? So, and I should mention that whenever I knit this pattern, the basic pattern, I do the body a little differently. I leave out one of the plain rounds in the increase section for the body. That will make sense if you have the pattern. So basically I knit with a shorter, chubbier gnome, because I think they look just as cute, and it takes a little less time to knit. I think it saves me, I'm not going to say how many rounds because it's a pay-for pattern, but yeah. Yeah, so, and I don't know if you can tell, but on the Santa gnome, I added little white cuffs to his sleeves as well to make him look more Santa-y. And I used the beard again from the cabled gnome pattern, but then I forgot to do the nose cabled beard. On the cabled beard, it's supposed to be an all-in-one. Hang on. It's really cleverly done, but I forgot to do that. So then I just made a nose from the basic pattern and sewed it on afterwards. I do think the Hebridean 2-ply also knits up at a larger gauge than palette. It's just a heavier yarn. So I think that that's why the brim of the hat looks snug, but it's a little Santa gnome. I'm excited to give it to Debbie. She's the one who's getting the Christmas socks as well, so. And finally, for my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, I knit him a custom gnome, and he owns a beer station, and they live in Texan Hill Country, which has a very strong German influence, and so there's an Oktoberfest where they live every year, and he's got an Oktoberfest outfit, and so I knit him an Oktoberfest gnome. I didn't think about the fact that the beard would cover up the overall part of, I think they're called lederhosen, but his is olive green, and he has very dark brown hair, but his beard has more red in it, so that's why I chose this yarn, and then he's got a gray hat, so yeah. So this is still Knit Picks palette, this and the white shirt and the flesh color. I've told you all those. This is Quince Finch in Marsh, which is a really nice olive green, and then the beard is either Jameson and Smith or Jameson's. It's Shetland 2-ply in Peat, which I had left over from a hat that I knit. And I was really pleased that I had that, because I think it makes it look a lot more like him. Yeah, so all I did to make my little Oktoberfest modifications was, obviously I started the body in cream and I switched halfway through. And then before I did the decreases to close it up, so at the same time when you're supposed to weave in all the ends, I took a crochet hook and I did an applied crochet chain in the kind of lederhosen style. Now, I was a little bit lazy because it's quite fiddly, because you have to have the yarn inside and you're pulling the hook through that way, so I didn't add suspenders to the back because I figured, it would sit like this, it wouldn't matter. Now, of course, I wish I had added suspenders from the back because the beard covers up a lot of it in the front. But by the time I realized that, he was already stuffed, and I am still really delighted with him. I think my brother-in-law will really enjoy him. I've knit my brother-in-law other little novelty things. Well, I've knit him 2 beer hats, and then I knit him a replica of the bus that he uses to take people on brewery tours, and he really liked that. He's very knitworthy, so I think he'll get a kick out of this, and it can just sit at the bar at the beer station. So, yeah, here are all my little gnomes. So the only one I have left is one for my mom, and she's requested the traditional red and blue colors. So I don't know yet if she wants a plain one or a cabled one. So I will have to consult with her. Yeah. So that was most of my Christmas knitting this week. But when I get to works in progress, you will see that I do still have one on the works that's a little bigger. I also wanted to mention, if you watched 2 episodes ago, this absolutely beautiful hat that I knit for my friend Christy for Christmas, and I was test knitting a pattern by Kyla of Arctos Knits. The pattern is now available, so I am going to add a project page to Ravelry for the hat, and I will include the link down below so that you can buy the pattern. I can't remember what it's called. Ornithi, I believe. She uses scientific names. She has a botany degree. But yeah, so since I can't quite remember, I don't want to commit myself. But yeah, and I highly recommend the pattern. I think it makes a really lovely hat. And it comes in 2 sizes, and she includes some options now for shortening it if you don't want it so slouchy. On to works in progress. I mentioned I have one more Christmas gift on the needles, and that is for my friend Kristen. She's the one who recently took up knitting. I'm so excited about that. And but meanwhile, before she took up knitting, back when I knit those dandelion mitts, I was showing them to her and talking about how amazing that designer, Erica Huser, is. And I showed her these elephant mitts that she has also designed. They're called the Peaceable Mitts, and Kristen fell in love with them. So I said that I would make her a pair as her Christmas gift. So I have knit one of them, and I have started the second one. And I've just done the little contrast cuff. And these really need blocking, but I'll show you my very messy, see that? That will go away in blocking. But they look so good on camera. They look like elephants. I'm excited. So Kristen's first project was a cowl that she knit herself, and it's all these different purples and greens. And so when I asked her what colors she wanted the mitt, she wanted the background cream because that's what the designer uses and it looks really nice. And then for the contrast, she wanted a purple to go with the cowl. And then I decided to go ahead and add this greeny yellow because it goes with the cowl too. She was visiting the other day and I was putting yarn on the cowl to see what went. So the main yarns are Knit Picks Felici undyed, which I had in my stash because I need to knit my aunt some owlie socks. She requested them, and Knit Picks Felici is the only yarn that doesn't make her itch, and I thought it would look better plain than striped. I need to ask her whether she wants them white or whether I should dye that yarn. But in the meantime, since I had 100 grams of it, I just wound off 30 for the mitts. And that should be enough because I've got that much, but we'll see. The purple is Knit Picks Stroll Hand Paint and Cordial, which is a really pretty mix of purples. And I thought it would go really nicely with the cowl. I can't show you that, but it's similar types of purples. And it will also let me knit some socks for myself with the leftover yarn, so that'll be nice. I don't actually have any pairs of Knit Picks Stroll socks. And I did that because Kristen, I'm not sure how sensitive she is to wool. But I think most of what she has so far has always been superwash, so I just don't want to risk, having very itchy hands. And then, but this is Quince & Company Finch, so this is a non-superwash, the greeny yellow, and that's Honey. And I had that left over from a gift I made another friend, and I don't think that will itch her or anything, but yeah. Mainly I ordered the Knit Picks Stroll because I was already ordering a bunch from Knit Picks, and I know that Kristen has the same size hands as me, and so I wanted to make sure that I had a finer fingering weight yarn, just because this isn't the kind of graph that you can modify, and so I wanted to make sure that it fit her, because I think the pattern says it's for a women's medium. Oh, I don't think I showed you the palm and gusset pattern. So I knit this pretty much to pattern. The only difference I did was the ribbing. I knit both cuffs on 56 stitches and then increased to 64 for the main pattern. And then I really wasn't sure whether to hold the cream or the purple dominant, because the cream is referred to as your main color and the purple is the contrast color, and usually you hold the contrast color dominant. But because of the way that this pattern uses negative space, which is so clever, the elephant ends up being in the background color, really. And so I first tried holding it with the purple as the dominant color, but there's these little spots in the legs that only have like 1 or 2 stitches, and that was getting lost. The cream stitches were so small that they were essentially disappearing. So I ripped it out and started over holding the cream dominant, and I think that that worked much better. The problem with having a higher contrast yarn with a pattern like this is that you end up having to catch a lot of floats, and the higher the contrast between the 2 yarns, the more likely you're going to have the floats kind of show through. So I was trying to catch the floats as irregularly as possible to try to prevent the purple from showing through, and so that's why there's a little bit of funkiness going on here. Also, I was working on 4 DPNs, so this was over needle join, but I'm sure that it will block out. I'm not worried about it. I just want to give these a nice thorough blocking before I give them to Kristen. And I really like the palm pattern. It was really easy to memorize, and it's really pretty. And yeah, so I've been making a lot of progress on my holiday knitting list. After I finish these mitts, I've only got 1 hat and 1 pair of mittens to go, although I might also knit another hat, but that's not like Christmas deadline. Oh, and I do have a pair of socks, but I don't need those finished until January, so I plan to work on them when I go down to Texas for Christmas. Yeah, so it's project number 1, and that was the Peaceable Mitts pattern. I always link to my project page. You can always find the patterns there, but yeah, it's very good, as are all of her patterns. My next work in progress is for me. Very excited about that. So last week I had finished all of my holiday knitting by Friday. I set myself a goal of 3 gifts a week. And so that meant I got to work on my own project during the weekend. So I worked on my new sweater. This is my Tea Party cardigan. And I talked all about the planning process last week. And now I have knit the body, so I'm ready to split for the underarms. And I love it so much. So the pale purple is Quince & Company Turn, which is 70% wool, 30% silk, I think. Might be 80-20, but I think it's 70-30, in dusk. And it's just this perfect mauve color. And I actually knit a different cardigan in it and then reclaimed the yarn, so this is its second time being knit up, which I always feel extra thrifty when I do that. The yellow is the same Quince & Company Finch in honey, so that's a really interesting comparison to what the surroundings can do for yarn, because this, the gold, and this that looks green, they're the exact same yarn. And obviously this is the exact same lighting. This is why it's important to swatch when you're doing color work, because yarn can behave in unexpected ways. But yeah. And then the dark purple, the plum, I overdyed a skein of Turn that was originally oyster, a very pale gray, and so I overdyed it to be plummy because that's what I wanted. Excuse me. And I'm adapting the Whippy Stockings pattern into a sweater. So basically the idea for the stripes with the color work bands comes from that. And you can hear a lot of details about that last week if you're interested, and watch the light fade as I talk. So yeah, it's going really well. It was kind of funny. On Saturday, I met up with some friends, and we were playing a kind of complicated board game. And unfortunately, I was right at the first color work section. In all of this knitting, it's almost all plain knitting, right? There are 25 rows in each of this, and 3 of them have color work, but somehow I had managed to time it so that I was trying to do color work and play a board game at the same time, and it was just not working. So I did end up having to rip back, because I was also trying to start the color work on the wrong side row because of where I joined the yarn, and I just could not get it centered. Every time I would end up a few stitches off or realize I'd made another mistake, so finally I just put it away. But once I got home and I had like some quiet space and wasn't trying to plot European domination, the board game was Scythe. Then at the same time as doing color work, then it turned out to be quite simple. Gonna have to start a new segment. As I was saying, turned out to be much simpler to do when I was focusing on that instead of trying to multitask. I did realize last week I had said that I needed 8 plus 4 to center the stitches. I actually needed 8 plus 5 because I wanted a plain background stitch for each. I also realized that some of this color work is asymmetrical, right? So there's the little X's, which are symmetrical, and then there's these, which are asymmetrical. And first I thought that I would want the asymmetrical ones to be on either side of the button band, but because I'm not flipping halfway through the back, that looked really weird because it stayed asymmetrical the whole way around. And I didn't feel like flipping it in the back. I just thought that that was one complication level more than I wanted for this sweater. So all I did was just start putting, there's one symmetrical motif in each of the bands, and so I just started putting those right near the button band. So there's an X on that one, and a cross there, and then this one is a square. This one is completely symmetrical. But yeah, and I checked gauge. So far I'm matching my gauge, so hopefully that continues. And I don't know, I'm really excited. I'm not sure if I'll be able to work on it this weekend because I really want to finish Kristen's mitts. But I could conceivably have this sweater done before Christmas, which would be great because I did not think that I would have that amount of time. The sleeves I'm just going to do in plain stockinette in the mauve colorway. So they should be very nice and relaxing reading knitting. And yeah. My gauge has changed quite a bit recently. It's tightened up, and I'm absolutely delighted that I finally get to knit a sweater on my wooden needles, which are my favorite. So these are from Dyat Craft, which is a made in the U.S. company based in Vermont. And they just make the most beautiful needles, and so these are their darn pretty interchangeables, and they're in laminated wood, and I absolutely love them. But they only go down to a size 4, and because I am historically a loose knitter and I prefer to knit my sweaters at between 6 and 8 stitches to the inch, I have tended to have to use smaller needles, and mainly metal needles. And so I'm really excited that I'm getting 6.5 stitches to the inch on size 4s now, because that's a gauge that I really like for sweaters, and the idea of using more wooden, being able to knit more sweaters on my very favorite needles is really exciting to me. So, luckily I have these in DPNs all the way from 0 to 8, I think, so I've always been able to knit DPN stuff on my favorites, but yeah. And I don't think I need to worry about yarn usage. I've knit half the colorwork bands, and I've still got this much of my yarn, so I should probably weigh the plum one, but still, I'm not that worried. I'll knit the 2 fronts first. I'm knitting it flat just because there's so little color work, as I said, in proportion to the rest of the sweater, that I don't think it's worth saving that hassle for steeking. And the one thing is, even though it's knitting fast, the finishing is going to take a little more time just because there are a lot more ends to weave in. So there's 2 on this side, and I think 4 on this side, yeah, for each stripe. So that's a lot, each set of stripes, I should say. And then, since I plan to keep working flat, both of the fronts are going to involve their own ends, and then the back will also involve the ends. So essentially I'll have triple the ends for the yoke, but I think it'll still be worth it, and I just weave the ends into the side seams. Hopefully it won't be too bulky. That might be my only concern, so I will see how that goes. But at least it's lighter weight yarn, so that should help. My final work in progress is one that I started today, and it's another personal project. You would think that I'm tired of gnomes, but I am not. And so this is how far I am in it. And I am test knitting Sarah's new gnome pattern. And the name is Gnome, pun intended, which I find hilarious. And she just had a new video up here on YouTube. She's mainly an audio podcaster, Imagine Landscapes, but she started doing some videos too, more relevant to her design work. And she shared this new gnome pattern and said she was looking for test knitters, and I absolutely fell in love with it. So I messaged her right away, and she was so nice and included me in the group, even though I'm sure she has way too many test knitters. But yeah, so I cast on this little hat today, and this is going to be my gnome. This is the 12th gnome that I've knit, and I've given the other 11 away. So it's really quite thrilling to finally have a gnome of my own. That's what I'm going to call my little project. But isn't this hat amazing? I want it in human size. It's basically a witch hat, right? The yarn is this. Woo. And it's yarn that I got when I went to the Finger Lakes Fiber Festival. I didn't go this fall, but I went last fall with my friends Christy and Kristen. And we were at a booth that had this yarn, and it actually comes with 100 gram variegated skein and then 125 gram solid one in one of the colors from the variegated one, so that you can have contrast heels and toes. And it was like buy one get one 50% off. So Christy and I both liked it, so we each got a skein. And it has sat in my stash ever since because I wasn't sure how it was going to knit up, because I haven't bought a lot of variegated yarn, so I couldn't just look at the skein and tell. And I also, it's a superwash wool alpaca nylon blend. I think it's the Alpaca Company is the name, but I'll link the yarn on my project page, so you'll be able to see it there. But yeah, so I wasn't sure how it was going to knit up. I also am really in love with my Quince & Company Finch socks. I tend to wear them way more than other socks, so I kind of didn't see the point of knitting socks out of yarn other than that. And I decided it would be absolutely perfect for this project. First, because obviously with a hat like this, the number of stitches that you're knitting on is going to vary. So I thought that that would look really fun with the variegation, and I think it does, because the stripes are thinnest down here, and then they get progressively thicker. I hope you can see on camera that it's a combination of chocolate brown with very pale pinks, which I really love. It looks like gelato to me. But yeah, so, and the other reason why is because obviously I went to that festival with two very good friends, and I have a lot of really good memories from it, and that's the only yarn that I got. And so I thought that using it to knit a gnome that's going to sit around in my apartment, not only will she match really well, but it'll just be a really nice reminder. So that's why I decided to do that. So I'm going to use the plain yarn for the body, and then eventually I'm going to knit myself a fraternal twin with solid for the hat and the variegated for the body, because according to the pattern, one takes 10 grams and one takes 15 grams, so I should have just enough of this for both. And yeah. So I will already have a project page, and as soon as Sarah releases the pattern, then that will go live. But yeah, if you want gnomes in the meantime, she's got two other wonderful patterns out. But I'm really excited about this one too. And so I'll probably cast on for the body after I finish talking to you all. Although I should knit Kristen's mitt. But that's what the weekend's for, right? I did have to take a bit of a break from knitting because I was knitting so much that I really aggravated my chronic illnesses. So all I knit yesterday was the little cuff of that mitt, and so I'm trying to pace myself a little more appropriately today. I got really into that sweater, and I just kept knitting away on it, and that was not the best decision health-wise, so don't expect to see this level of productivity from me in the next episode, but I'm really pleased. You might notice that I'm suddenly dressed differently. That's because I'm recording on a different day. I had recorded the last episode, and then when I started to edit it, I realized that I completely forgot to talk about the topic, which was my yarn stash and whether my stash philosophy had changed over the years. So, sitting down today in order to go ahead and address that. And this question came from She Bear. Hi. I have to admit, it's been such a long time since the last time I talked about my stash that I don't really remember what my yarn stash philosophy was. So I'm just going to share my current philosophy, and I don't know if it's changed or not. But first, to answer the question of, is my stash smaller, I'm going to say no. I mean, I haven't added it up, but I need more storage space for my yarn than I used to, which suggests to me that my stash has grown and not shrunk. Now, for the past couple of years, I've been knitting primarily from stash, And I don't buy yarn very frequently. I do buy yarn for gift knitting because most of my stash is about personal knitting. I mean, it's not that I'm unwilling to use that yarn for other people. It's just that a lot of times it's in my favorite colors, not theirs, and that kind of thing. So I'd rather buy yarn to make a project really special for them. So I do buy yarn for that, and then if I get a gift card, I'll spend that. But other than that, I don't really buy yarn for myself. The reason why my stash is larger is because I am very fortunate to have received a couple really big gifts of yarn from fellow knitters that really helped plump out my stash. And also, I tend to receive yarn from my parents for Christmas and sometimes for my birthday. So really, it's gift yarn that is enhancing my stash over the last few years. And honestly, I'm very okay with that. I feel very grateful that I have that yarn, and it's really nice for me that I can knit and not have to worry about spending money on projects because I really do love to knit, and I don't always have a lot of spending money. So, I don't know, it feels very comforting and like a safety net that having all this yarn means that I'll be able to knit even if suddenly I have no spending money. I'll easily be able to knit for a year with my current yarn. Might be 2 years. I'm not sure. So I really enjoy having a stash from that perspective. The downside, of course, is storage. As I mentioned, it used to be that all my yarn needed to fit in the top shelf of my kitchen cupboards because I'm short and I have issues reaching above my head, so I don't use those shelves for anything else. So I was like, that's the place for yarn. But it has outgrown that. And so recently I rearranged my bookcase and I got rid of quite a few books. I rehomed them. And so now I have 2 cubes of my bookcase. I've got one of those 5x5 cubes. You can see it behind me, but it's perpendicular, so you can't see the cubes. Anyway, from IKEA. And it used to be almost completely full of books, and now a couple of the cubes are devoted to board games because that's a new hobby of mine. And then the bottom 5 I cleared out so that I could have those like storage drawers that are also cube shaped. And so now I have yarn in those. And I'm going to insert a photo that I took so that you can see. And the 4 cube things are yarn. Well, actually, the far left one is where I'm keeping all my gift projects right now. But it's also where I'm keeping my blanket squares for the blanket that I'm working on. So I think that one will be more project oriented. The middle 3 are yarn. One is all of the yarn that I have bought to knit other people gifts for. And clearly I need to get on that since I have a whole cube full. And then one is all of my fingering and sport weight leftovers, and one is all of my worsted and Aran weight leftovers. And the woven basket on the final end just holds my yarn swift. And that's also, I can fit any hibernating projects or anything like that. And She Bear also requested a look at my stash. So I have taken some photos of the upper kitchen cupboards where the rest of the yarn lives. And I haven't really decided. I think over time I'm going to switch out and keep like sweater quantities in the cubes and keep my leftovers in Ziploc bags in the kitchen shelves just because I guess right now I've been knitting little things, so I've been using the leftovers a lot, and it would be easier to be able to just see what was in a bag than have to paw through a cube. Whereas with sweater knitting, you're looking for much bigger quantities. So anyway, so I haven't quite worked out the kinks, but yeah, I do have the yarn stored in my kitchen cupboards. I will insert those photos here. It is sort of vaguely organized. I keep all the sweater quantities together for the most part. The far left is the one that's kind of breaking that rule. That's where I've just been putting my newly acquired yarn. And then I tend to keep all of like the lace weight together, all of the worsted and Aran weight together, and I also keep all the colorwork yarn together. So Hebridean 2-ply, Jameson and Smith, and Knit Picks palette all kind of live near each other since that's what I use for color work. And yeah, so that is how my stash is currently organized, and I'm happy with that. I do keep wanting to knit from stash, and I would eventually like a smaller stash, and that's mainly because first I am planning to move in with my boyfriend next year, so I'm going to have a little less storage space than I do here. And secondly, I am interested in spinning, but I'm not interested in getting a spinning wheel and then making more yarn with my current stash size. So if my stash ever becomes quite small, then I will take up spinning. So that's kind of in the back of my mind as another thing that I would like to do. But it doesn't bother me since now I have a place to put it neatly. Before I had reorganized my bookcase, it was starting to bother me because I didn't have a place to put it away, and I live in a studio apartment. So if there's not a place for something, then the apartment just gets messy really quickly. But now that I've sorted that out, I don't know, I'm really happy with the current state of my stash. It inspires me and it's exciting to knit from, and I'm so incredibly grateful to all of the people who have sent me wonderful yarn that I'm going to get to play with. And yeah, so I guess it fills me with gratitude and excitement and creativity. I would never want to get to the point where I have no stash. I feel like having at least 4 months worth of yarn, that would probably be my goal. And of course, I've also knit a lot less, excuse me, in the first half of this year than my usual knitting speed. And my knitting has been picking up again, but I don't know what it's going to kind of settle at as my average knitting speed. So that would affect my stash, but yeah, I don't know. But I really appreciate the question, and I thank you a lot for giving me the suggestion. It was a really fun little thing to chat about, and hopefully you enjoyed the photos, even though all the yarn is in bags, so it's not the prettiest. But, oh, I guess perhaps I should also talk a little bit about my yarn buying philosophy, because that is related to yarn stash. So as I mentioned, I happily buy yarn to knit other people gifts right now. And I've been buying a lot from Knit Picks these days, and that's because even though I prefer to knit with regular yarn for my regular wool for myself, not superwash treated, most of the people that I knit for either have wool sensitivities or aren't going to hand wash and air dry necessarily. And so if I'm going to be using superwash yarn, then I figure I might as well buy from Knit Picks, because then I feel like pretty much all commercial yarn, like Cascade or Barocco or whatever, they probably all have about similar kind of manufacturing techniques and that kind of thing, and environmental footprints. So Knit Picks is very affordable, and that's pretty much why I've started going with it. Sorry if you heard, apparently I have a text message. But when I'm buying knitting for myself to knit with, I still like to buy less processed wool. I like to buy in the US because then it has a smaller environmental footprint. And so I mainly buy from either Quince & Company or Elsa Wool for myself. And if either of those offers yarn suitable for whatever I'm knitting a gift for, then I'll buy from them first, and then whatever doesn't work from those two companies, I order from Knit Picks. And that has just become kind of my yarn buying philosophy over the last year. So hopefully that was helpful, and see you soon. So that has been another episode. I hope that you enjoyed hearing about my projects and my very rambly thoughts on my personal yarn stash and my personal yarn buying philosophies. I look forward to seeing you again, and until then, I hope you enjoy your knitting. Bye!